Former AEW World Champion CM Punk will be out of action for 6 to 8 months through an injury suffered at AEW All Out. We have the latest on more details and reactions to the backstage brawl involving Punk, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks after the media scrum at the event last Sunday. Speaking of Punk, also, top stars have not been featured on the promotional material for AEW Full Gear. We have the ratings for this week's episode of Dynamite with the fallout from All Out, plus the controversial topics being addressed on the show, plus Bobby Fish. We have more on his departure from the company and his issues with CM Punk too. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories, especially this week, to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. So let's start off talking about the latest about former AEW World Champion, that being one CM Punk. Now, we don't really know still his status with the company. We don't know whether or not he's going to be fired or not. We know he's currently suspended, CM Punk, but we also now know more details about his reported injury that he suffered at All Out. Now, we've spoken about this a couple of times here on the channel, and we now have a timeline or a time frame as to how long he's going to be out of action for, and it's a real considerable amount of time because CM Punk will be sidelined for around 6 to 8 months due to the injury suffered while competing at All Out 2022. Now, this comes from a report by Dave Meltzer, who reported on the Wrestling Observer radio show that Punk had endured a torn arm muscle while facing Moxley. Now, we don't know what muscle, we don't know a ton of specifics about it. There have been lots of rumors about what this injury actually is for Punk. There have been rumors about possibly a torn triceps, a torn bicep. There had been rumors about a torn pec. What we do know, though, is that Punk is injured. He was hurt. He said it himself in the media scrum after All Out. He said, "I'm old and I'm hurt." We didn't know how hurt at the time, but we know that he was hurt during his match against Jon Moxley. We don't know if it was exacerbated by what happened with his brawl with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and everybody else in his locker room after that infamous media scrum. But according to Dave Meltzer, Punk endured a torn arm muscle while facing Jon Moxley, and this injury will indeed necessitate surgery for the former AEW World Champion. Now, Punk, of course, had formerly vacated the AEW World Championship, and already he's been stripped of that championship after defeating Moxley at All Out, and that was confirmed on Dynamite on Wednesday. The 43-year-old is currently suspended for his role in the post-All Out brawl that has engulfed wrestling discourse over the course of the last several days. We've spoken about it extensively here on the channel. Now, though his injury status necessitated, we don't know. This is the thing. Is people will say, "Oh, that's why he was stripped of the AEW World Championship." Well, probably not, because you look at Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. They were stripped of the AEW World Trios Championships, and they're not injured. They're not injured for the amount of time that CM Punk is. So I think Punk being stripped of the championship probably has more to do with the brawl as opposed to the injury, but I guess he would have been stripped of the championship anyway. But we did see in the past an interim champion being made in Jon Moxley, but they're not going to go down that route again when it comes to the AEW World Championship. Now, Meltzer stated that Punk's employment status with All Elite Wrestling is still very much up in the air, because Meltzer is saying that Punk could indeed still be fired by AEW, which houses a lot of people currently right now. There are a lot of people in the company that don't want CM Punk to return. Now, the question is, will Tony Khan bow to pressure from those within the company? Will he bow to pressure from those on the talent roster? Will he bow to pressure from those from a legal perspective? There might be lawyers within AEW that are saying, look, get rid of this guy, you know. We've had this instant backstage. From a legal point of view, we need to do that. He's injured as well. And as I spoke about the other day, Punk's value has just decreased massively over the course of the last few days. Previously, what Punk had in his favor when he was being compared to the Elite and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, he could say, well, you know, I'm a draw for your company. You pay me a lot of money, but also I delivered a record rating for Rampage for my debut. When I've been on pay-per-views, I've done record business for AEW in terms of buy rates for the specific IPs. I delivered the first $1 million gate or $1 million house in AEW history for Double or Nothing. So he had that in his favor. And frankly, CM Punk wouldn't say the things that he said in that press conference if he wasn't very, very comfortable in his spot and knew that he was practically untouchable. When you have that brawl, when you say the things that you say, and then when you're out of action for 6 to 8 months, your bargaining chips just got significantly reduced. And that might be the problem for CM Punk going forward. Now, also, his employment status does depend on this investigation that's ongoing as well. AEW has commissioned a third-party investigation into the events following All Out. Now, accounts of what really happened have varied a lot. We've spoken about this on the channel extensively too. You can go and check out the videos. We've got the views of CM Punk and Ace Steel, which say that the Young Bucks were very confrontational. They kicked the door down after they didn't answer, and Matt Jackson threw the first punch. You've then got the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega are saying a wildly different situation whereby Punk let him into the locker room, and Punk was the first person to start throwing punches. He tried to sucker punch Matt Jackson, and that started off things, and Punk has threatened to sue people. So you look at two different sides of the story that are wildly different, hence why they have to have this investigation into really what's happening. Now, it is generally accepted that the Bucks and Omega approached Punk following his comments he made against the EVPs and others in the post-show media scrum. A fight then broke out. We don't know who initiated it. Punk did throw punches at Matt Jackson. His friend, AEW producer, Ace Steel, threw a chair at Nick Jackson. Now, Ace Steel's reasons for throwing the chair and getting involved vary as well. You know, some people say it's because his wife was in the locker room. Some people say it's because he was defending a friend. We don't know. We also know that he pulled the hair of Kenny Omega and also bit the former AEW World Champion as well. Now, speaking of that fight as well, we have more details on the backstage reaction to it. Fightful Select, Sean Ross Sapp dropped a huge report yesterday talking about all of the backstage reactions to it, and they've learned more about Dynamite this past week and the CM Punk Elite situation. Now, it should come as no surprise based on everything that unfolded on Dynamite and the content that unfolded. There were no explicit mentions of the situation or the parties involved in the brawl at AEW All Out about that entire situation. Nobody was mentioned during that show. Punk, Omega, the Bucks, they were all removed from the Dynamite intro as well. This went for commentary, promo, social media, and everywhere else. Now, in the days that have followed, in recalling the stories, those that have been in touch with Fightful and those that have been in touch with CM Punk and Ace Steel have softened on the stance that the Young Bucks definitely kicked the door down. This is when it gets very interesting, isn't it? Those people, those parties that initially said, the Bucks, they kicked the door down, they're going, well, maybe they didn't kick the door down, maybe it was something a little bit different, which is very interesting. Instead, they followed up with the idea they could have kicked, shouldered, or otherwise forced their way in. They said that, quote, kicking the door down was clearly a turn of phrase in that sense, and it should have been clarified. Essentially, they're saying they didn't kick the door down, but they forced their way in. Okay. Now, the reason was given that Punk didn't feel like talking to anyone as he was either getting medical attention or had just been given it to take care of his cut. The side has also varied on what they've said caused Ace Steel to begin biting and throwing chairs, going from his wife being near to him believing that Kenny Omega was attacking CM Punk when he was trying to pull Punk off one of the Young Bucks. Again, this is the problem with all of this, is we're getting so many conflicting details. So some people are saying, oh, Ace got involved because his wife was in the room. Others are saying, no, it was because Kenny Omega went to pull one of the Young Bucks off CM Punk, and he thought that Kenny Omega was attacking CM Punk, so he went after Kenny Omega. Okay, the story's already evolving and changing, which implies that no one really knows what's actually going on here. Now, Fightful are reiterating the accounts of the fight are wildly different from each side, and even different versions of each side, and shouldn't be taken as gospel. These are just what have been relayed to people close to them. Once again, as I've said several times this week, the truth most likely is somewhere in the middle, and you have to try, and it's difficult for us to do, we weren't there. But what AEW have to try to do is get all of these different accounts and put together what is the most likely situation, put the pieces together here. Now, so far, talent haven't been told explicitly what is to become of CM Punk, but most of the people that Fightful spoke with are under the impression it's all pending this investigation. Essentially, if the investigation comes out that Punk was the aggressor and the initiator, chances are that he's going to be fired. Now, Fightful spoke with numerous people on the staff and roster who said that unless Punk's suspension is unpaid or he's fired, it's superficial considering he'll be out of action well into next year. As of Wednesday, much of the heat that they're hearing on Punk was much about the scrum rant more than anything. If anything, they were saying, well, we don't really have an issue with the brawl because we don't really know what happened with the brawl. We have an issue of him being unprofessional and the things he said at the press conference where he buried the EVP, he buried people on the roster, essentially buried the company, and with Tony Khan, the president, sitting right next to him, he buried Tony Khan to an extent as well. Even though, as I've said a million times over the last 7 days, Tony Khan is just as responsible for all of this because he could have nipped it in the bud way, way, way earlier, and he decided not to, or he didn't feel like he had to, which is bizarre. It really is bizarre. Now, Punk, according to Fightful, had long been rubbing the locker room the wrong way, but one source said that blaming him for all of the locker room issues of late simply was not fair, as they had reached an all-time high when Punk was gone. Basically saying that these issues, they were still there when CM Punk was on hiatus due to his foot injury. They've always been there for a while. So to say that Punk's responsible for all of them, this has been quite a toxic or quite a inflammatory dressing room for a long time, and when you add someone like CM Punk in, it's like adding gasoline to a fire. That's probably fair to say. I'm not going to sit here and say that CM Punk isn't a difficult person to work with or can't be a prickly person, and as I mentioned, he's gasoline. He's absolutely gasoline on what was already a simmering fire in the AEW locker room, and he turns it into an inferno, and I don't think it's fair to completely blame Punk for that, but also AEW and Tony Khan have to consider what can we do to try and fix this issue. Now, when they spoke to the AEW roster on Wednesday, Fightful, many indicated that after the show there was a much more positive vibe, with one saying it couldn't have been worse than the chaos of the previous days. The same source said that the situation was out of sight and out of mind for plenty of the roster who just wanted to show up and work. Another talent said the best way for all parties to make up the public embarrassment would be to get over the issues, make money for the company, and highlight other talent along the way. Now, Fightful are told that as of Tuesday, much of the roster didn't know what they were going to be allowed to say, or even if they even could address it, and some of their content had to be adjusted accordingly. By them, they probably mean people like MJF and Max Caster. Frankly, they're the people that would say something, right? Now, on Sunday, Fightful had reported that a top talent was set to take some time off, which Jon Moxley confirmed to actually be him. After this all-out event, he was due to take some time off, and AEW sources had indicated they planned on him being back by the Cincinnati show in October at least, but he ended up staying on to help conduct a talent meeting, add star power to the show, and participate in the title tournament. Again, this would imply, as I said previously, that Moxley isn't going to win that tournament or make it to the finals. I suspect that Bryan Danielson will win that tournament, and then he'll feud with MJF accordingly, or MJF will cash it in at the end of Grand Slam. I think that's where they're going to go. And I still think Moxley will get that time off that, frankly, he's absolutely deserved. He's been the company EVP. I keep doing this. MVP. EVP on the brain. MVP for the year. Now, Kenny Omega, Christopher Daniels, and Michael Nakazawa were all slated to be in Japan for the Tokyo Game Show in relation to AEW Fight Forever, the video game. Now, they haven't heard of them being pulled from that as of yet, but we'll have to wait and see. They've also, Fightful have heard the same report by the Wrestling Observer, that AEW Chief Legal Officer Mega Parek was around for the situation as it unfolded. As I mentioned previously, that's not because I think she was a bystander. I would suspect that's because the Bucks and Omega brought her as a witness, as a HR witness, if indeed something did go down. And it would be said about Fight Forever, what happened? CM Punk's on the cover of it. He's the cover star, or one of the cover stars, so what happens there? We don't know. We really don't know. Now, this is quite interesting as well when it comes to Full Gear. As posted on AEW's Twitter account, the organization has revealed that the November 16 episode of Dynamite, which is the Full Gear pay-per-view go-home show, will take place in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Now, noticeably, on the promotional graphic for the event, CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks are all missing, whereas other top talent such as Jon Moxley, Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, and MJF are all featured. This could indicate that the reported suspensions will at least run until Full Gear. Of course, as always in wrestling, cards are subject to change. This is probably a graphic they just made for this week. They will make other graphics closer to the time, so I wouldn't get too attached to that graphic anyway. But that's the situation when it comes to Punk. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about his injury, about his employment status, what you would do, and just the latest news and the craziness when it comes to CM Punk. Let's talk about Dynamite. Of course, as I mentioned, we spoke quite a bit about Dynamite there. We have the ratings for this week, and AEW had a lot of action happening in and out of the ring heading into Dynamite this week, and a lot of people were interested to see what the effect of just the stuff that happened in the ring at All Out, but also all of the chaos that happened out of it would happen, what effect it would have on the ratings for Dynamite on Wednesday. Now, WrestleNomics has shared viewership information for Wednesday night and the September 7 episode of Dynamite. Now, the show drew an average of 1.035 million viewers, which is up 1.5% from the previous week's episode. This is the best audience that Dynamite has done since March 23, so a good number, frankly, for AEW. Now, the key demographics saw an even bigger percentage boost as Dynamite received a 0.38 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic, which is up 8% from the go-home episode of All Out. This is the best demographic number that the show has done since June 1st. Now, that was the episode following the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Now, ranking-wise, Dynamite came in second for the key demographic in terms of the cable originals, just behind the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. However, the issue of Dynamite remains the numbers received a year back. This Wednesday's Dynamite was down 21.5% from the September 8, 2021 episode, which was also an all-out, fall-out episode with 1.319 million average viewers. Now, the key demographic is even more drastic with a 28% drop. That is the big difference. I wasn't sure what to expect when it came to the ratings this week for Dynamite. To be honest, I know they're a bit up and it's the best number they've done since March. I kind of expected a little bit more, not because they delivered a great pay-per-view. I thought the pay-per-view was fine, but because of all of this chaos, any publicity is good publicity, right? I thought, and I expected maybe to get a 1.1, a 1.2, something like that. But it just goes to show my point I've been making for a few weeks now, or a few months really, about All Elite Wrestling, is that it's not as hot as it was last year. The facts are there. The numbers are there. After All Out last year, which you featured the in-ring debut of CM Punk, you featured the debuts of AEW for Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole. There's huge momentum coming out of that show. After all of that, they did a big number, 1.319 million viewers on TNT at the time, and that was huge numbers, and AEW felt red hot at the time. It really did. It felt like there was a bit of momentum building, and all of these stars were getting released or leaving WWE, and they were coming over to AEW, and they really did feel like there was something happening, legitimate competition. And fast forward a year later, there's chaos in the dressing room. They're ice cold, in my opinion, in terms of interest. And it just, I can't really explain what's happened in the last 12 months, but they've just fallen off. That buzz that was there is not there anymore. It really isn't. And I don't know. I think that's a combination of several things. I think booking, the shows are very formulaic. You can talk about injuries, but the buzz that was there last year isn't there anymore. And frankly, the buzz that was there last year is now on WWE. WWE has that buzz because of Triple H being in charge of creative and in charge of talent relations. That's really the situation right now. That buzz that AEW had of people looking forward to watching the product and being excited about the product and the talent looking at it as being the place to be, that's WWE right now. AEW had it for a short second, but it's WWE right now. It really is. And how does Tony Khan fix that? I don't know if he can. Honestly, I don't know if he can. Because I think people that might have been interested in going to AEW in the past from WWE, they're happy now that Triple H is in charge, and they look at that locker room in AEW and go, I don't want to go anywhere near it. It's very WCW-like, which is interesting. Finally, Bobby Fish. We know that Bobby Fish, of course, recently left AEW. We have more details on Bobby Fish leaving All Elite Wrestling. Fightful have this report about the former Undisputed Elite member leaving the company. Now, Bobby Fish and AEW, according to Sean Ross Sapp, had entered discussions about possibly renewing his contract, and there was said to be some interest on both sides about continuing the relationship. However, the two sides couldn't come to terms financially and parted ways. Now, Fightful were told that AEW thought it was somewhat amicable until Fish's tweets about CM Punk and AEW that have arisen over the last 7 days. Now, Fish remains friendly with many in the company. Of course, you've still got people like Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and others under contract, as well as other people that he's worked with in the past. Now, we're told, or Fightful are told rather, that there wasn't much by the way of creative plans for him once Kyle O'Reilly's injury happened as well, which is kind of what I spoke about previously when I spoke about Bobby Fish, in that I think that the idea of keeping Bobby Fish around suddenly didn't become very financially viable when you've got Adam Cole on the shelf through injury, and you've also got Kyle O'Reilly, who's just had neck fusion surgery. He's going to be out for a long time. We don't know if he's going to be back, and hopefully he will be, but neck fusion, that's 9 months to a year, possibly even longer. What's Bobby Fish to do at that point? What value does he have to AEW at that point? He has his injuries as well, and when someone's contract comes up like that, then you suddenly go, well, he's not totally financially viable anymore. Now, Fightful have heard nothing of WWE reaching out to Bobby Fish, so don't expect a Bobby Fish return anytime soon, because again, what value does he really have to WWE? His value was being in the Undisputed Era, and they're both in AEW right now. You've got Roderick Strong still with the company. I guess he could come back and be part of Diamond Mine, but he doesn't fit NXT 2.0. He doesn't fit that age bracket. So I don't know. I don't know how he could go back to WWE. Now, he hasn't been mentioned creatively from what Fightful have heard so far within WWE, so it doesn't look likely either. As highlighted after he left the company, there were also issues with Fish and CM Punk, which Fightful are told didn't have any bearing on his contract expiring. This isn't a case of what kicked off all of this drama with Punk and Cabana and them not renewing Fish's contract because he had issues or beef with CM Punk. Fish has told many people that he just didn't appreciate Punk's attitude after the match they had in October 2021. If you recall, Fish, when he came in initially to AEW, was working as a singles, and he had matches against the likes of Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, and I don't recall hearing anything at the time of any issues between Punk and Fish, but apparently Fish didn't like the way that Punk was speaking to him or his attitude after that match. I don't know. If we get more details about it, we'll talk about it here on the channel. So there you go, guys. That's the AEW news for today. Of course, if there are any more news, we'll talk about it here on the channel. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.